Time for some more biomolecules. This time we're going to talk about nucleic acids. What are nucleic acids? I'm so glad you asked. Nucleic acids are DNA and RNA. Their full names, deoxyribonucleic acid for DNA and ribonucleic acid, tell us that they are nucleic acids. So both of these are the nucleic acids. Yes, DNA and RNA are much shorter, but I would like you to know what DNA and RNA stand for. DNA and RNA are both polymers. The monomer in this case is a nucleotide. The nucleotide looks like this. It's got a sugar, it's a 5-carbon sugar, and then attached to that is a phosphate and a nitrogenous base. The sugar and the phosphate are the same in all of the nucleotides in each of the nucleic acids. In DNA, the sugar has one fewer oxygen. That's why the sugar is called deoxyribose. In RNA, the sugar is ribose. In both cases, it's a 5-carbon sugar, so C5H10O5. The nitrogenous base determines what the nucleotide is called and what its function is. So it's called a nitrogenous base because the rings have nitrogens in them, nitrogenous meaning having nitrogen. So the nucleotides in DNA are adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine, indicated by their initials. I do want you to know their names. And in RNA, the nucleotides are adenine, guanine, cytosine, and uracil. Notice the first three are the same. The fourth is different. DNA has thymine, RNA has uracil. That's going to be really important. DNA is a double-stranded helix, and it is used for information storage. RNA is a single-stranded helix, and it is used for information transfer. In every cell, there is at least one chromosome or strand of DNA that carries the instructions for making that cell and everything in it. That's kind of weird to think about, isn't it? Every single one of the cells in your body, in its nucleus, has all of the instructions to make every cell in your body. So DNA is that molecule that makes up the chromosomes that carry the instructions. When those instructions are going to get carried out, the DNA is copied into RNA, and the RNA is then going to be used to make proteins and other things that the cell uses to do stuff. For those of you who are like, what do you mean do stuff? Cells move, they break things down, they digest your food, they contract when your muscles move. All of these things done by cells using proteins and other structures. Okay, and the instructions for how to make all that is stored in the nucleus in DNA and then copied into RNA to be carried out. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, DNA, in a DNA and RNA molecule, actually, the sugar of one nucleotide binds to the phosphate of the next nucleotide. And that creates what we call the backbone. It's called the sugar phosphate backbone. And it creates the structural part of the helix. Then in DNA, the bases pair up in a specific way. A always binds with T, G always binds with C. So if one strand has, here's the blue is guanine, the other strand is going to have cytosine, okay? If one strand has adenine, the other strand is going to have a thymine. So these things, the bases that are part of the nucleotide bind together across the middle of the double helix, and those are called the base pairs. And we actually measure how long a DNA molecule is by how many base pairs it has. So the sugar phosphate backbone makes the outside of the helix, the base pairs make the inside of the helix in the DNA molecule. Now in the RNA molecule, we only have one of the bases because it's single-stranded. But RNA can actually bind to DNA, and when it does, it's going to bind in the same predictable way. So this one has an adenine as its first base. The first thing that it could bind with on this strand of DNA would be this thymine. So the thymine is going to bind with adenine. Wait, what about the uracil? Well, here where we have a thymine, it would bind to a uracil, or sorry, the adenine, blah, blah, blah. The adenine on the DNA would bind to a uracil on the RNA. You know what, when we do DNA and RNA, I'm going to say that better and it's going to make a lot more sense. Okay, so what you need to know is DNA and RNA, different sugars. They are nucleic acids. They are polymers of nucleotides, and each of the nucleotides has, where'd I go, a sugar, a phosphate, which makes the sugar phosphate backbone, and then a base, which pairs up to create base pairs in the DNA molecules. Okay? And if this works, we're going to see, oh, come on. DNA twists, much like MC Hammer spinning. For those of you who don't know who MC Hammer is, you're so missing out. Anyway, it always twists clockwise. Cool. Okay, we'll go back. All right, that is the end of nucleic acids. I know that was short. We'll come back. We'll do a lot more about genetics later.